At precisely 11:30 on December 22nd, 1944, four German officers approached the American lines near Bastogne, Belgium, carrying a white flag. They brought a formal surrender demand from General Heinrich von Luttwitz, commander of the 47th Panzer Corps. The message was stark. The American forces were completely surrounded. 7 German divisions encircled them. Relief was impossible. Supplies were limited. Ammunition scarce. The ultimatum was clear. Surrender with honor now, or face total annihilation under German artillery and armored assault. This ultimatum was delivered to Brigadier General Anthony Clement McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st Airborne Division. McAuliffe had been napping. His staff shook him awake to deliver the German demand. He read the note, glanced around at his officers, and replied with a single word: nuts. His staff assumed it was a quip, but McAuliffe insisted that was the official answer. Nuts. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard typed the response. Colonel Joseph Harper carried it personally back to the German officers. When the bewildered Germans asked for clarification, Harper explained plainly, "It means the same as go to hell." In simple terms, no. McAuliffe's one-word reply embodied a core principle of American military doctrine, developed over more than 20 years. While most armies, when surrounded, would hunker down and await rescue, Americans counterattacked. This tactical mindset wasn't accidental. It resulted from deliberate choices by military leaders who studied the First World War and vowed the United States Army would never fight that way again. The transformation began on September 1st, 1939, the day Germany invaded Poland. On that same day, General George Catlett Marshall became Chief of Staff of the United States Army. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had passed over 33 more senior generals to appoint Marshall, a move that stunned the military establishment. Marshall inherited an army ranked 17th in the world. It had 174,000 soldiers scattered across 130 posts worldwide, smaller than the forces of Portugal, Romania, or Spain. Most units were under strength. Equipment was outdated, dating back to World War I. Training was minimal, focused on garrison duties and ceremonial functions. In 1939, the U.S. Army resembled a constabulary force, not a modern fighting force. Officers spent more time on paperwork than battlefield preparation. Enlisted men performed administrative tasks, built infrastructure, and guarded installations. Large-scale maneuvers were rare. Combined arms training was almost non-existent. The idea that this scattered, undertrained force might face a major war seemed remote. But Marshall had first-hand experience of modern combat. He served in France during World War I as a staff officer with the American Expeditionary Forces. He planned major operations, including the Meuse-Argonne offensive, which involved moving over 500,000 soldiers into position for the largest battle in American history. He had witnessed American units suffer massive casualties in frontal assaults against fortified German positions. Marshall saw talented officers fail because they could not adapt to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. He observed the consequences of rigid, centralized command, unable to react quickly to evolving situations. He understood that the next war would be faster, deadlier, more complex than the last. American forces needed new training, doctrine emphasizing flexibility, initiative, and aggressive action, not blind adherence to plans that became obsolete the moment combat began. The foundation for this doctrine had been laid years earlier at Fort Benning, Georgia. From November 1927 to June 1932, Marshall served as assistant commandant of the infantry school. During those 4.5 years, he transformed the way the U.S. Army trained infantry officers. 200 future generals passed through Fort Benning as students or instructors, including Omar Nelson Bradley, Joseph Warren Stilwell, Matthew Bunker Ridgway, and Walter Bedell Smith. Marshall's approach was radical. He replaced complex tactical problems with simple, practical exercises designed to teach rapid decision-making under uncertainty. He told instructors, "Officers need to learn how to think, not what to think." Combat would never provide perfect information, ideal conditions, or sufficient time. Officers had to act decisively despite uncertainty. Traditional military education focused on following procedure and waiting for orders. Marshall taught the opposite. He demanded officers take initiative, make decisions based on circumstances, and act without waiting for approval. He stressed that it was better to act imperfectly now than wait for perfect conditions that never arrive. Marshall's doctrine emphasized offensive action. The best defense was a strong, immediate counterattack. Units under attack were taught, do not wait to assess the situation fully. Do not wait for reinforcements. Do not wait for orders from higher headquarters. Identify the enemy. Fix them in place. Strike before they can consolidate. This emphasis stemmed from Marshall's study of World War I combat. He observed that German forces were most vulnerable immediately after an attack, disorganized, low on ammunition, uncertain of American positions. A prompt counterattack could recapture lost ground before the enemy reorganized. If Americans hesitated, the Germans would reinforce, establish positions, and deploy machine guns. What could have been regained in minutes became hours of deadly combat. Marshall also noted that American officers often failed, not due to lack of courage, but because they could not make rapid decisions under pressure. Officers trained to follow detailed procedures became paralyzed when communications failed or the battlefield evolved too fast. To fix this, Marshall fundamentally changed officer training at Fort Benning. He eliminated detailed multi-day scenario problems. Instead, officers received minimal information, tight deadlines, and were evaluated on rapid decision-making and clear communication. One hallmark of Marshall's method was the tactical walk. Officers were taken into the field without warning. At points along the route, instructors would announce, "Your unit is here. Enemy reported in that direction. What are your orders?" The officer had 5 minutes to assess terrain, choose a plan, and issue verbal orders. The walk continued, with new problems presented, simulating the chaos and pressure of combat. Elaborate written orders were useless. The lesson, a good decision executed, now beats a perfect decision too late. Marshall also reformed evaluation. Traditional military education emphasized memorization of regulations and procedures. Marshall prioritized practical execution. Officers who made sound tactical decisions under pressure, leading soldiers effectively, were rewarded, even if they couldn't quote manuals perfectly. This shift trained officers to think independently, expecting initiative and judgment rather than rote execution. The impact went far beyond Fort Benning. Graduates became instructors and commanders, spreading Marshall's methods throughout the Army. By the late 1930s, officer training emphasized initiative, rapid decision-making, and aggressive action. Marshall also revolutionized training methods. Long lectures were replaced with field exercises under pressure. Officers solved tactical problems with limited resources and tight timeframes. The goal, realistic stress that mirrored combat. These reforms bore fruit during World War II, as Marshall trained officers became the commanders leading American forces to victory. When he became Chief of Staff in 1939, Marshall implemented these principles across the Army. He knew America would likely enter war in Europe. He knew the Army was unprepared. Rebuilding required more than equipment and soldiers. It demanded a transformation in mindset and training. Marshall's first priority: identify and promote officers aligned with his vision. He ruthlessly removed those who could not adapt. Over 600 officers were relieved or retired before U.S. forces saw combat overseas. This included generals, colonels, and senior staff officers who had served decades. Critics claimed he destroyed the officer corps. Marshall saw it as saving it from obsolescence. Officers promoted were younger, aggressive, and willing to challenge convention. Men like George S. Patton, Jr., believing in speed and offensive action. Men like Dwight D. Eisenhower, skilled at coordinating complex multi-service operations. Men like Jacob L. Devers, championing mechanization and modernization. These officers embodied Marshall's doctrine of aggressive mobile warfare. Marshall's second priority: training. The Army had to grow from under 200,000 soldiers to millions. How those soldiers trained determined survival and success. In 1940–41, the U.S. Army conducted the Louisiana Maneuvers, the largest peacetime exercise in American history. Over 470,000 soldiers participated. Entire divisions moved across Louisiana and East Texas, practicing offensive and defensive operations, river crossings, air-ground coordination, and long-distance movement. Forces were divided into Red and Blue armies, engaging in simulated battles using all available tactics. The exercises spanned over 3,000 square miles, lasting several months. Civilians hosted the largest military operation on American soil. Soldiers camped in fields. Towns hosted headquarters. Local economies experienced massive military influx. Marshall personally observed the maneuvers. He tested whether his doctrine worked at scale. Could large units maintain offensive momentum? Could junior officers act decisively without waiting for orders? Could soldiers adapt to rapid change? The maneuvers confirmed his beliefs. Units that counterattacked immediately performed best. Junior officers who acted independently achieved better results. Small units attacking flanks disrupted larger formations more effectively than frontal assaults. Notable examples: Dwight Eisenhower, serving with the Third Army, demonstrated how armored units could bypass strongpoints, striking deep into enemy rear areas. George Patton, commanding an armored division, pushed units beyond maneuver boundaries, arguing that real war had no limits. Umpires complained, but Marshall approved. Exactly the aggressive mindset he desired. Weaknesses were also revealed. Logistics struggled. Supply lines failed. Fuel and ammunition ran out. Communications broke down. Coordination between infantry, armor, and artillery lagged. These problems were solvable with better training, improved equipment, and refined procedures. Fundamental concepts were sound. Aggressive action, decentralized decision-making, rapid exploitation. By December 1941, when the U.S. entered World War II, the Army had grown to 1.6 million soldiers trained in Marshall's aggressive doctrine. Field Manual 100-5, published in 1941, codified the doctrine. Offense was decisive. Defense was temporary, a means to prepare or regain momentum. Defensive units were instructed to counterattack immediately, disrupting enemy gains and retaking ground. Unlike British, French, or Soviet doctrines, which emphasized careful preparation, centralization, and methodical attacks, American doctrine required initiative at every level. Any unit, from sergeant to captain, could counterattack immediately. Training created soldiers who could think independently, act decisively, and adapt quickly. At infantry replacement centers, recruits underwent 13 weeks of grueling training. They learned battle drills, emphasizing aggressive action, ambush response, fortified assault, hasty attacks, building clearing. Recruits marched 20 miles with full gear, immediately assaulting objectives. Foxholes were dug and abandoned. There was no time to rest. You acted with what you had, when you could. Officer candidates at Fort Benning endured compressed, intense training, equivalent to 4 years of college-level instruction in 3 months. Scenarios had no perfect solution. Officers made rapid decisions under incomplete information, accepting the consequences. This philosophy created a distinctly American tactical culture. Junior leaders expected to show initiative, taking risks rather than waiting for permission, ready to act decisively, just like McAuliffe at Bastogne.